this hour, please. Dummy with loads of crazy, wild effects, because David Katz is in the house.
100 FM, serving the universe.
This is
Kiss 100!
calling the meek and the humble. Welcome to Blackboard Jungle. So don't you fumble, just be humble.
In 1987, David Katz was asked by Lee Perry to ghostwrite his autobiography, giving Katz privileged access to Perry's life through interviews, film, photographs, and unpublished writings. The end result is People Funny Boy, the definitive biography of Lee Scratch Perry, a musical genius. David Katz, I salute you for this work. It is absolutely phenomenal. And the first question has to be, how long did this take you?
It took about 12 years from start to finish, give or take.
How did you get into the works of Lee Perry? Where did this obsession begin?
Well, I grew up in a small town north of San Francisco called San Rafael, and I had the good fortune that there was one radio station in that town, and every Sunday there was a reggae show called Midnight Dread, hosted by Doug Wendt. And that was really my first exposure to reggae, and it just blew my mind.
The works of Lee Perry. Well, for my money, one of the most exciting dub tracks ever recorded, Blackboard Jungle, and there's a story to the album, isn't there, in terms of the various versions that have been pressed?
Yeah, absolutely. The original pressing, a very limited pressing, was mixed in true stereo with channel separation, so you sort of have the drum and bass in the right-hand channel and the treble elements in the left.
So here you are in San Francisco listening to Doug Wendt on the Midnight Dread show. How do you end up in England, and how do you get to meet your hero, Lee Perry?
Well, I first came to England when I had a year out, when I sort of finished school. And again, my exposure to reggae through things like DBC, Dread Broadcasting Corporation, just took it to a next level, and just other pirate radio at that time in Britain. So when I had to go back to the States to start going to college, I sort of, always wanted to get back to London and further my education in music. And eventually I managed to come back, while I was finishing off college, doing a degree.
What were you doing a degree in? What were you reading?
It was English literature, basically. But when I came back here at the end of '86, I found that Lee Perry was actually living here, which I wasn't aware he was still here. And I had already written an article about him in a small underground music paper called Wiring Department. So I made contacts with the people who were managing him at the time, and ostensibly arranged an interview with Scratch. But of course, when I turned up at the time and place, Scratch wasn't really too interested in doing an interview. He was more interested in sort of blowing smoke through a wooden recorder that he was sticking in alternate nostrils and holding on to an electric light bulb, blowing a whistle sometimes. So, however, he took away the article I had written about him, and apparently he was struck by something that I said in the article, which was in regards to a song he'd recorded called Introducing Myself, where basically he just was telling Thatcher, Reagan, and the Queen that they all had to stand up and take notice that he was there to right their wrongs. So I think when Scratch saw that his message was still getting through to me, when a lot of other people in the music press were maybe saying he was a bit of a washed-up has-been, he summoned me down to a studio where he was working and had me go through this kind of initiation ceremony where I was made to get some stones from the Thames for him, which he put into a video monitor that he had set up in the studio where he was filming himself. And at the end of the day's work, he presented me with this silver ring that had a kind of skull with wings on it that I was meant to wear on the ring finger of the hand that I wrote with. And he just placed that burden on my shoulders of being the ghost writer.
David Katz. Lee Scratch Perry, The Genius of Lee Scratch Perry, People Funny Boy, has just been published in the UK, and we're homing in on some of the stories and anecdotes that David has obviously discovered in this vast research that he's gone through to write this book, and we've got the music to back it up as well. The first track you've chosen is Chicken Scratch.
Yeah, Chicken Scratch. As far as we know, it's the actual first recording that Lee Perry made as a vocalist. Now, of course, he's better known as a producer, but when he started his musical career, the beginnings of his musical journey, it was as a vocalist. And when he first came to Kingston, he was trying to work for Duke Reid, but Duke didn't really want to use him, so he ended up recording for Cox and Dodd. And this is the track.
Hello, guy in dirt black and blue tie. Why you looking so sad? Tell me why. Grab her skirt, come on, lads, chicken scratch. All night long, standing there, looking sad. Grab her skirt, jump around like you mad. Whoa, mom and dad, kitchen cat, guys on doll.
Chicken Scratch. I've interviewed Lee Perry a few times over the last 20-odd years, and to say that it's been a bizarre experience every time is an understatement, and to try and get information out of him is often very, very difficult. I once asked him where he came from and how did he end up in Kingston. He said, I came from outer space.
Chicken scratch.
But David, you do know, obviously we do know where he came from, and here he is as a youngster in Kingston, Jamaica, recording for Cox and Dodd, but his background before he came to town.
Yeah, well, basically, Scratch grew up in the country. He grew up in a sort of remote part of Jamaica, about as far from Kingston as you can get. And basically all that was out there where he was growing up was sugarcane. There had been bananas planted, but they succumbed to a detrimental disease, so sugarcane was all that was going on. But Scratch wanted to avoid that. So first it was dancing that inspired him the most, and he became a champion of this dance called the Yank, which was like this kind of violent jerking step that they were doing in the US. And he became a dance champion. Then he moved on to playing dominoes, sort of becoming a domino champ, touring around the western parishes of Jamaica. And eventually he found work when Negril was being developed, sort of dynamiting rocks and bulldozing roads, where apparently he made this connection with the sounds of machinery conflicting with nature. So the way he tells it is he heard this kind of voice commanding him to go to Kingston. But, you know, a number of other things happened along the way, which if you read the book, you'll find out. But actually, he didn't make it till Kingston until, you know, he wasn't so young by the time he turned up. And he's given conflicting information about when he arrived in the past, which makes it more difficult. But, yeah, like I say, he went to Duke Reid first. Duke Reid just kind of wanted to steal his lyrics and give them to singers like Stranger Cole. So after a bit of a dispute, Cox and Dodd came in and took him onto his team.
And what about this tune, Prince and Duke?
Yeah, well, Coxon, you know, originally when Lee Perry was working with Coxon's crew, he was kind of, he used to assist with promoting new records and sort of finding out what was hot with the competition. So when he began to record his vocals, some of the earliest tracks were sort of throwing words, as they say, kind of combative tunes against Coxon's enemies. So this one is against Duke Reid and Prince Buster.
I was wrong.
that loping ska beats. Sound of the 60s on a Sunday night. It's Kiss 100, Whitsun Sunday, and my very special guest is David Katz, author of People Funny Boy, the genius of Lee Scratch Perry. An essential item. I can't recommend it enough. If you love the reggae vibe and you love Lee Perry, well, you've simply got to capture the book and find out more. David homing in on it and with anecdotes and pieces of music that reflect the life and times of Lee Perry. So there he is, lashing out against the Prince Buster and the Duke.
Indeed. You know, by this point, he's sort of building himself up to be more important in Coxson's organization, and eventually he becomes like Coxson's right-hand man, all the while throwing words at the competition.
And what about Give Me Justice?
Well, Give Me Justice dates a little bit later. It's coming up to 66 when Scratch is really kind of disillusioned with Coxsson because he never really sorted him out properly with pay and he wasn't giving him credit for the work he was doing. So he tells the story where he says to Coxsson, "Oh, I'm taking a little holiday. I'm going up to the country to see my family." But he actually didn't do that. He snuck back into the studio behind Coxson's back and made this tune straight to Coxson's head. Give Me Justice.
Hey! David Katz is in the house. Wanted justice, lashing out against Coxsson Dodd. You want to find out more, you have to check the book. People Funny Boy, Lee Scratch Perry. David Katz, the author, is in the house. From San Francisco to Kingston, Jamaica. To
Via London.
Via London. He was the upsetter. Why did he take that name?
Well, he still is the
I beg
upsetter.
your
He'll
pardon,
always
of
be
course.
the upsetter. He's given various explanations, but basically he says, you know, he's there to upset the people who deserve to be upset, basically.
And this is the track, I Am the Upsetter.
So this dates from Scratch's short-lived partnership with Joe Gibbs. So after he broke away from Coxsone, first he was at World Studio as a kind of freelance in-house producer. Then Bunny Lee had a bit more weight in the industry, kind of bumped him out of that position. So he was freelancing with various people, did some background vocals and some tunes with Prince Buster, ended up with Joe Gibbs, did this other kind of swipe at Coxsone, very, very vocal swipe at Coxsone. But the partnership wasn't to last because, you know, Joe Gibbs was too much of a boss, just in the same way that Coxsone was.
People Funny Boy.
Yeah, this is really the tune that changed everything in a way.
Absolutely. I remember wearing this out on my dance at Viva in my bedroom. My father's going, "Will you turn that down? And who is funny anyway?" Well, people are funny, Dad.
Yeah, well, people are extraordinarily funny. That's correct.
And Lee Perry is, in many ways, not only funny, but the bizarre behavior patterns, David. I mean, let's. I mean, we don't want to jump the gun, but
yeah, comes a bit later.
Yeah, it comes a bit later. Well, let's stay on track, because obviously the one that really bust him over here was a phenomenal hit record. Was Return of Django?
Yeah, but even People Funny. I mean, in Jamaica, supposedly it sold 60,000 copies at the time, and it was just this electrifying new beat. And then Return of Django did even bigger in Britain.
It was a phenomenal success over here. The sound of the Upsetters.
The tune that would bring Scratch over to London for his first time. Live appearances up and down the country, and even over in Holland for the Shooby-Doo, broadcast on Top of the Pops.
When Aston family man Barrett was a special guest on this program, he relayed the stories of working with the Upsetters and what a great time he had. There is Lee Perry with his group, the Upsetters, and the record that put him in the British pop charts for the very first time. The Skinhead Anthem.
Yeah, interestingly, although Scratch brought Family Man and his brother and the rest of that crew over to tour, they didn't actually play on this record.
That's right, absolutely right. Typical of the way things were in terms of what was supposed to happen and what did happen.
Indeed.
So the actual lineup down in Jamaica for the Upsetters, David, what was the original lineup at the very beginning?
Yeah, well, typically, once they had the name Upsetters, you're really talking about another version of what's known as Gladdy's All-Stars. So it's Gladstone Anderson on the piano, Winston Wright on organ, Jackie Jackson on bass, Hux Brown on guitar, and any number of drummers, typically either Winston Grennan, Paul Douglas, or Hugh Malcolm.
Right. Now, Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, Bonnie Wailer.
Yeah, they'd been working with Scratch at Studio One, and there's this whole kind of unexplored history of them working together at Studio One. Scratch first was really one of the key guys behind the scenes promoting them when they first arrived at Coxsone around 63. Then later he started to kind of collaborate with them, using them for backing vocals on tunes like Hand to Hand, Man to Man in 66. And then he also did a couple versions of Wailer songs, like he used the Put It On rhythm for a kind of rude song he did called Rub and Squeeze. But by the time the Wailers turned up at the Upsetter record shop at 36 Charles Street, once Scratch had some hits and established himself down there as a hot producer in Kingston, they were really looking for something else. Particularly Bob Marley was trying to find a better way to express himself. And teaming up with Scratch really just drew some incredible results, because Scratch totally restructured the Wailers' sounds. He made it much more Jamaican. He kind of said, don't just try to ape your American vocal heroes. Do something different. Make it more raw, more rootsy, more honest. So apparently the song that started it all off was My Cup, which is... Scratch says Bob Marley came to him with this song, and Scratch took it as a true confession. His cup was running over. He didn't know what to do. So even though Scratch just wanted to work with instrumentals and didn't want to work with vocalists, he had to take them on.
When I first heard the Soul Rebel album, it was in the days when you could go to a record shop and they would cue the record up, and you go into a listening booth and listen. And I stood there in this listening booth having my own private party because I just couldn't believe how good it was. It was a phenomenal album and a landmark in the development of the Wailers. And David Katz is our special guest tonight, Sunday night on Kiss 100, the author of Lee Scratch Perry, People Funny Boy. And David's just explaining the significance of that song, My Cup. But what about the work with Junior Biles?
Yeah, I think, again, Scratch had worked with Junior previously, partly as a member of the Versatiles group and also on his own. But it was really once Bob Marley and the Wailers broke away from Scratch's stable to try to make it on their own in late 71 that Scratch could fully turn his attention to Junior, give him the attention that he needed, and the combination was phenomenal. And Scratch said that, you know, other producers didn't really know how to approach Junior, and you really had to kind of take that time and extra care to get the best out of him. And this is certainly one of the best. Beat Down Babylon.
Babylon, the legendary Junior Biles. We're homing in on the work of Lee Scratch Perry. Sunday night on Kiss 100. Cosmic Jam comes up at 10 o'clock with Patrick Forge. Hope you're enjoying your Whitsun bank holiday. I hope you're enjoying the selections of David Katz, the author of the book People Funny Boy. And I was hoping that you would choose the tune you're about to play. I really was. I wasn't sure. Will he bring this in? And you have.
Yeah, this is one of the wackier numbers, and it just shows again Scratch's ceaseless urge to experiment, concentrating on sound, what can be acceptable in music. You know, just anything goes with Scratch, and here it goes. Do not adjust your sense.
From your soul squire, the light of burning fire and blazing wire. Grant my desire and get me higher. Come on and light the fire. Ring the bell and break the spell, because I'm moving out on your hill. Could you tell the way to it is to do it? Come on and chew it, move it. Said farewell to the sounds of now. The other side sucking sound you could tell. Sounds of solid people coming on. Mama, could you suck it and work it and ringing it to the bell?
And the DJ's name was
Jerry Lewis.
Jerry Lewis. An outrageous, over-the-top Jamaican radio announcer. And there you go, the wild and wacky world of Lee Scratch Perry. And if you were my neighbours in 1972 in South London when I used to play that all the time and drive you mad, I apologise.
Drinking your bass in a mean reggae ride.
There are so many tunes. The biggest problem with doing this program for David and I was, we've got to play that, but we haven't got time to play that.
I was hoping we could play all 12 cuts of Beat Down Babylon, Dave, but I guess it's not possible at this time.
Burning Wire.
How could you put it on your stocking?
Yeah, what's interesting about this tune as well is you'll notice that synth line, which was overdubbed in London. I mean, by this point, Scratch was traveling back and forth between Kingston and London fairly regularly, and also New York. Sometimes he would bring up master tapes and overdub stuff, just experimenting all the time.
One of his biggest pop chart hits, of course, apart from his work as Lee Perry the Upsetter, was with Susan Cadogan.
Yeah, and Susan was the daughter of a minister from Belize, actually born in Belize, and with a Jamaican mother. Came to Jamaica when she was young and always wanted to sing, but never really thought she would do it professionally until a friend brought her down to the studio to sing on a song that was for another friend of this DJ, actually, called, same guy, Uriel Aldrich there. I think Jerry Lewis actually was involved in the production of the first tune, which was called Love My Life. And when Scratch heard her voice, he said, right, you're the one I want right now, and I know what track it's going to be on, and this is it. Heard so good.
Boy, was this a hit, or was it a hit? Massive tune.
First you take my heart in the palm of your hand and you squeeze it tight. Then you take my mind and play with it all night. You take my pride and you throw it up against the wall. You take me in your arms, baby, bounce
know what we should have done, David? We should have made this a 2-hour program, because then we'd have been able to really dig into the roots of this.
Yeah, well, that would have been my pleasure. But it's a pleasure to be here in any event.
Hurt So Good, and the clock is against us and ticking fast on the wall here. Hurt So Good, Susan Cadogan, produced by Lee Perry.
First big hit to come out of Lee's now legendary Black Ark studio.
Exactly.
And also one of the first tunes he ever recorded with Boris Gardner on bass.
We're back with more stuff from Lee Perry after this.
Kiss.
The Life and Times of Lee Scratch Perry, as told by David Katz, author of People Funny Boy, a brand new book which has just come out, and it is absolutely essential. The music of Lee Perry. Police and Thieves, Junior Mervyn.
Police and thieves in the street, fight to the nation with their guns and ammunition.
Now that was and still is a landmark in the development of Jamaican popular music, not only because it was just a brilliant record, but because of the Clash version and so on, and how the tune inspired so many people and turned so many people on to reggae.
Yeah, it's really one of the songs as well that made Lee Perry such a household name abroad. Possibly even more so than Return of Django did at the end of the 60s. And as you say, its influence is still being felt now, like Luciano's great recent recut, and even people as diverse as Boy George have had a crack at this song.
1979, I went to the Black Ark studio, and Lee Perry was dancing around in the studio, on the mixing side of the glass. And in the studio itself, the instruments covered in oil paint, nothing functioning. And to say that he was acting in a strange manner is an understatement. Where did it all start to go bizarre?
Well, people who are close to Scratch will say that he's always had this sort of eccentric or different streak in him. He's always been somewhat outside of mainstream society just by his nature. But I think when things really come to a head is, after he's been built up through his relationship with Island Records, who definitely gave him more concrete support than any other company in, the history of his career, through tracks like this and Max Romeo's great War in a Babylon album and a whole series of classic albums. In fact, we're about to play another track from Super Ape, which is really one of Scratch's all-time great dub works. It's just such an amazing organic whole representation of everything he had his hand in 76. But shortly after these series of albums from 76, 77, going up into 78, things began to be strained between Scratch and Island, and there were some masterworks he was working on that they were reluctant to issue for whatever reason. I asked Chris Blackwell about it. He said that probably at the time it's because he didn't really think they were good enough to be released. At the same time, you had some personal circumstances that were becoming problematic. And eventually you have his common-law wife and the mother of 4 of his children, Pauline Morrison, actually taking up with a member of the Meditations, a group that Scratch really built up and helped establish, and even, linked with Bob Marley, again, to give them a more international profile. I think that those types of things were very, very hurtful to Scratch. Then there was also various conflicts and pressures from people who were hanging out at his studio, maybe disgruntled musicians who thought he was earning a fortune and wanted a piece of the pie. And maybe Scratch himself has said that he was being extorted by some gangsters. Some gunmen came on more than one occasion demanding money from him. And I think all these things just sort of reached a boiling point, sort of roundabout kind of late 78 sometime. And basically, he decided to shut the doors of the Black Ark to visitors and didn't want particularly dreadlocks hanging out there anymore. Part of that also comes from this sort of radical philosophy he had adopted from some group of Nyabingi people, some sort of hardcore, a sort of spin-off Rastafari subgroup who had radical beliefs and ideas, who were also looking to Scratch as the breadwinner for their project. So I think all these things combined sort of put a lot of pressure on Scratch. And, also the political situation in Jamaica at that time was very, very volatile. And I think all these things combined with maybe Scratch's sort of drinking too much rum and drinking bad wine and not really eating properly, just being inside the microcosm of his studio day in and day out, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. I think it all just got too much. When Scratch has talked about when things went wrong for him, he did focus quite specifically on this Congos album, The Great Heart of the Congos, which has been reissued so many times and given its really best reissue by Blood and Fire a couple of years back, a very lovingly restored, excellent reissue package. But, you know, he has said, like, he just couldn't understand why Island refused to release it. And some of the Congos suggested, you know, maybe they wanted to put it on the shelf because it was too much of a threat to Bob Marley's popularity. But it's really hard to know exactly what happened with this album. But if we take a listen to this track, Children Crying, this is from the first mix of the album. Scratch did a couple different mixes that are radically different. And apparently Island declined to issue either for whatever reason.
For most fans, the most creative period in his life. The time at the Black Ark was just phenomenal. The sound he got out of the studio, the equipment he used, considering, you know, what it was all very basic, wasn't it, David?
4-track studio, and somehow Scratch made it seem, you know, like it was 24-track, and these kind of incredible over-the-top effects, phasing, and, you know, all different applications of echo and delay. Really ahead of his time in that respect.
Why did he burn down the Ark?
Well, he told me that basically it was something he had to do. He just had to destroy it, or it was going to destroy him. And he wanted to go back to being a singer. He was tired of being, you know, sucked dry by these vampires that just wanted him to produce them and feed off him. So eventually, after drifting around for a while, he claims that he is the one who definitely burned it down, specifically. So, but after that time, you know, he began this nomadic existence, turning up in New York or the Bahamas or different places to do the odd album with whoever would back it. But really, the next most significant thing to happen for him is when he was in England in the 80s, late 80s, and teamed up with Adrian Sherwood, a very, very powerful combination of two creative individuals. And that great album, Time Boom, is just really one of the best he's done since the Ark has ceased to be. So let's take a listen to this track, Jungle.
Well, I surely know who I am. I am the future, thunder, ball of fire. Rock.
Rock in the solid rock I stand. All of the ground is sinking sand. Here I am, coming from the jungle, like a roaring lion. Coming from the jungle, I am the king of Zion. Moses is called. Ooh, he has of Capricorn. Splash chase the fishes of the sea. A holy unicorn.
Please scratch Perry on the wire. Please scratch Perry ball of fire. Please scratch Perry on the wire. Please scratch Perry ball of fire. Please scratch Perry.
Coming back the jungle. I can never stop it.
Please scratch Perry.
Coming from the jungle. Coming in the peace and
Please scratch Perry.
Rockstone rhythm. Rockstone words. Rockstone music. Rockstone shepherd.
Please scratch Perry.
Hee-haw.
Tick, 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 tick.
Please scratch Perry.
Lee Scratchberry with David Katz, the author of People Funny Boy, The Life and Times of a Genius.
Yes, Scratch's contribution to music is just immense, and it gives me great pleasure that this book can be published while Scratch is still living, to benefit from the glory that it will hopefully generate for him. Acknowledgement of his works, his pioneering works, which continue.
And thanks to you, and well, how many years?
Yeah, well, 12 years, give or
12
take.
years of research, interviews. I mean, this is the other joy of the book, apart from the stories that we've heard about, but it's all the detailed analysis of all the work and everything that Perry has conducted, and your research to gather all that information, which has been phenomenal.
Yeah, it was a great joy for me to be able to interact not only with Scratch, but also with so many of these great musicians and singers and engineers that he interacted with. Really the foundation of reggae music.
Bizarre stories. In 1979, Scratch came to my flat in South London and saw a Ras Daniel Hartman painting on the wall, and immediately took a biro out and started putting X's all over it. I said, that's a work of art. What are you doing? No, X, Ajax. And I've still got the piece with Lee Scratch Perry's Ajax written all over it. And as soon as he saw an album, Steve, he did the same thing. Bizarre behavior.
Yes, sometimes difficult to comprehend.
What about the famous story of the garden and the TV?
Oh, well, apparently, when Scratch had a little bust-up with his current wife, he drifted back to London again, and sort of Adrian Sherwood offered to put him up. A couple days later, Sherwood came home, and there was his brand new widescreen Sony TV set buried in the back garden.
By Lee Perry.
I believe in miracles.
This track, Black Ark Experiments, that's playing at the moment, was a highly autobiographical track created in conjunction with the Mad Professor. And apart from Adrian Sherwood, it's really Mad Professor that Scratch has done his most solid work with in the UK, or just outside of Jamaica in general. And they've done quite a series of albums, very interesting, very captivating material. And this is a personal favorite of mine, because if you listen to the lyrics, Scratch really talks about his early days, you know, driving a tractor in the grill.
And play my record like you should. BBC for your mind. And play my record like you know you should. You say, free your mind and play the devil game. Free your mind. I'm your heart doctor. And I'm your mind doctor. Hey, I used to drive a TD9 tractor in the grill. I used to pack up rock smoke. I have contact with rock stove. I say rolling to rolling, roll rock in space rock. Roll thunder roll, and let lightning flash, symbolic, a jungle lucky, jungle rumbling, jungle jump of Africa, taking over UK, London, England, Great Britain. I believe in the pinnacle, but I don't believe in the liquor. Come to me, my patient. I'm your heart doctor. Come to me, my patient. I'm your heart doctor. I'm your heart doctor. Your soul manufactured. fa salati do. Open every door. Do re mi fa salati do. Can't open any door. God Almighty said, I give Egypt for my ransom, and me give Ethiopia because I'm handsome. Me give the heart of Africa, the silver and the gold. It's just fun, evening combined.
Lee Scratch Perry.
Yeah, interviewing Scratch can be a difficult process, to say the least. You never know what you're going to get, as any journalist who's met him has had the pleasure of finding out. But sometimes, you know, he sums things up quite succinctly in his own way, and you have to pick through the words and find the truth. So let's listen to an extract taken from an interview conducted by journalist Ian McCann, in which Scratch sort of talks about some of his religious beliefs.
We need love. Positive, perfect love, then we're going to and build our love. Anything can build our love. Right. Hold that. Then that nation is not a gimmick. So we say, that's why I break away from the studio. If you look at me bigger than the studio. Yeah. There's a nation out there that must connect to the heart of the imperial majesty of Black Africa to bring peace to the universe. If you'll ever live in peace, immortal peace, universal peace, when black and white meet. In one man style, soul and body music. There's a one heart, one God, one aim, and one destiny within.
So you would still describe yourself as a Rasta man?
Means everything.
First a change, I am here. Spit, 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 piss, 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 poop, poop. Shit, shit, straight from the pit, Jupiter said. The upsetter is back. Doctor, calling to you, my patient. Calling out there to you, my fans. Calling out there.
Up for Living by the late and great Augustus Pablo, one of the wonderful creations that Augustus Pablo made with Lee Perry, or somewhat embellished by Lee Perry. If you listen to this mix, Scratch gets such an ethereal sound, really raising Pablo's incredible melodies to higher heights. And it's just wonderful to see the way they interacted, usually in a bartering situation. You know, Pablo would record, blow a little melodica on some tracks for Scratch, and Scratch would give him free use of the studio.
Melodica of Augustus Pablo, blown at the Black Ark studio, produced by and created by Lee Scratch Perry in more ways than one, vibes and spirits and sheer enthusiasm. It was quite remarkable what he achieved, and also, of course, after the Black Ark burnt down, what he went on to achieve, and we get to that in just a moment. But you've just handed me something very interesting here, David. Treasure Found.
Yeah, Treasures Found, episode 3, No Baby Lion, a new compilation coming out of more treasures from Junior Delgado's back catalog. And the track we're going to play here is actually one of the first things recorded at the Black Ark ever. And it's by Time Unlimited, Junior's old group. The track known now as Trotting On Home. And it's just, again, quite an amazing piece of music from the early days of the Ark.
almost time for us to head home. Stand by for the Cosmic Jam with Patrick Forge and drum and bass at midnight. It's Whitsun Sunday evening on Kiss 100. Welcome along if you've just joined us. And if you have just joined us, you've missed some great music, some great stories as well. A couple of weeks ago, I was doing a gig in Zurich, and I was in the dance, and I said to the promoter, how close am I to Lake Zurich? He said, come out the stage door, will you? Turned left. We walked 50 yards, and there was the lake. So, oh, okay. Sort of traveler's syndrome, you know, airport, hotel, sleep, shower, gig. And we stood on the banks of the of Lake Zurich, and he turned to me and he said, over there is Lee Perry's house on the other side of the lake. I said, you'll get out of here. He said, no. He said, well, if we turn up the bass, he may float over. He didn't, though. He is occasionally to be seen strolling around Zurich and eating out and hanging out. That's obviously now his base.
Yeah, for the last 10 years or so, he's been based there with his current wife, Mireille Campbell, and, well, Mireille Perry now, if you like, and they've got a couple of kids of their own now. But really, Scratch is always on the move, so they're back and forth between Jamaica and Switzerland, and he's often on tour. He tours regularly in the USA now. He's got quite a wide following now, partly due to a magazine tribute, Grand Royal, which was instigated by the Beastie Boys. And eventually, when they were both on tour in Asia at the same time a few years back, they made a face-to-face link. And then when they bumped into each other in New York, the Beastie Boys requested that Scratch lay some vocals on a track that their keyboard player and engineer, Mario Caldato Jr., had built specifically with Scratch in mind. And the results are quite inspiring. And I think it's just interesting to see how things have come full circle for Scratch. You know, all those years struggling, not ever feeling he ever got the recognition that was due to him for his pioneering works. And now you have high-profile artists who are really giving him that recognition.
Let us close with that track by the Beastie Boys. David Katz, thank you so much for joining us this evening on Kiss 100. You must investigate the book, listeners. Lee Scratch Perry, People Funny Boy by David Katz, the genius
Made the bicycle more clear.
of Perry.
Clear, more clear.
David Katz, thank you.
Thanks a lot, David. It's been my pleasure to be here.
Jungle, jungle. Merlin Production Company. Black Ark International Branch. Present. I've been going around. Have you seen Mr. Brown? I've been going around the town. Have you seen Mr. Brown? Whispering voices. Whispering voices. Whispering voices. They want full control. Always lose control. They want everything. Always lose everything. All been going around. Have you seen Mr. Brown in town? Have you seen Mr. Brown?
Kiss 100.